Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm Jon Favreau.
I'm Jon Lovett.
I'm Tommy Vietor.
On today's show,
Vladimir Putin.
What?
Keep going.
Getting right into it. I like it.
On today's show, Vladimir Putin inches closer to a war in Ukraine that could have global repercussions. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki is here to talk about the Biden administration's new strategy for 2022. And we assess our level of concern over the latest headlines about creeping authoritarianism in a new segment we're calling Democracy Doomscroll. All right, let's get to the news. It is being dominated this week by the escalating conflict between Russia and Ukraine. President Biden said at last week's news conference that if Vladimir Putin invades the former Soviet state, he would increase the U.S. troop presence in bordering European countries like Poland and Romania, which are also NATO members. Sure enough, the New York Times reports that Pentagon officials have presented Biden with an option to send 1,000 to 5,000 troops to Eastern European countries, with the potential to increase that number tenfold if things deteriorate. State Department has also ordered all family members of U.S. Embassy employees to leave Ukraine immediately and authorized some employees to depart as well. Here's Pentagon spokesman John Kirby at Monday's briefing.
Secretary Austin has placed a range of units in the United States on a heightened preparedness to deploy, which increases our readiness to provide forces if NATO should activate the NRF or if other situations develop. All told, the number of forces that the Secretary has placed on heightened alert comes up to about 8,500 personnel.
Tommy, for people who've not been paying close attention to this news because maybe they were watching football all weekend, why does Vladimir Putin have his sights set on Ukraine? And why are the U.S. and our NATO allies so concerned? I'm asking for our audience and for me.
Why don't we? I know, but I want to hear if Tommy knows.
You can take those one at a time. John Kirby. I went to Haiti with John Kirby back in 2010. We slept on the floor of an embassy after the earthquake and tried to help stuff down there.
That's cool. Any more names you want to drop?
Alyssa Mastromonaco was there. We all hung out, ate MREs, and did stuff. Anyway, okay, so I don't know why Putin has his eyes set on Crimea, but I can offer you guys some theories. Does that interest you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe, and just some like historic context. Like, what if no one paid attention to Crimea in 2014? You have to go way back.
Well, the long view is that Putin gave this speech in 2005 where he called the breakup of the Soviet Union a catastrophe, the greatest catastrophe of the century, or some sort of hyperbolic thing like that. And he also said that the net effect of the breakup was that Russian citizens were no longer living in Russian territory. And everyone interprets that as him thinking essentially that these former Soviet republics are still Russian. He wants to kind of bring them back into the fold.
He's been jonesing for some reunification for a long time.
There's a bunch of people in Ukraine who speak Russian, who sort of feel some affinity for Russia. He wants to bring Ukraine's orientation back towards Russia. He wants it to be a buffer between Russia and Europe and give him some sort of space between, Russia and NATO. That's one theory. A sort of an associated theory is there's been all these protest movements lately in Belarus, in Kazakhstan, that are right on the border of Russia. Those are
also former Soviet states.
Yeah, those are Russia's. Putin's very close with those leaders. Some would call them his stooges. And a protest movement in Ukraine, like the ones we just saw in Kazakhstan and Belarus, is what set off the invasion of Crimea in 2014, because at the time a pro-Russian leader of Ukraine was jettisoned by the protesters, and then Putin rolled in the tanks. So a lot of people think he's desperately afraid of these color revolutions, doesn't want them to spread, doesn't want them to oust him. He's an authoritarian. Associated with that, people think that maybe NATO expansion went too far. Over time, the alliance grew. It pushed further east. It got onto Putin's doorstep. He views that as a threat. I think that's a bit of a leap to suggest that NATO expansion it hasn't happened in a while. So let me say this. I think it's a bit of a leap to suggest that NATO expansion is to blame for what's happening, but I think it's sort of part of the mix.
And Ukraine is not a NATO state, but in the past there had been some thought that maybe it would be at some point.
The Bush administration nominated Georgia, the country, and Ukraine for NATO membership in 2008. They have to fill out what's called a NATO action plan. They have membership action plan. They have not finished that yet, and it's not predestined that it would happen. But it's sort of a worst case scenario for Ukraine right now because they were nominated to join NATO, but they don't have its protection, so they're sort of like in this NATO
target on their back.
NATO limbo. Didn't mean that, but yeah, you get it. And then the last thing is like politics, right? Putin wants to wring some concessions out of the West by flexing. He likes to distract from domestic problems by lashing out abroad. So, that's another piece of the puzzle. I don't know what the answer is. It's not good. There's 100,000 troops on the border.
So
Scary.
why are the U.S. and NATO, our NATO allies, so concerned? Why don't they just say, oh, well, if he wants to take Ukraine, he takes Ukraine?
Because there's sort of we believe in democracy. We believe in countries should choose their own leaders, that you should not just be able to invade a country at whim. There's a bit of hypocrisy there given the Iraq War and some of the past, but that's sort of the principle we're standing up for.
Is there a fear, or how much of a fear is there, that it's not just former Soviet states that are under threat here, but NATO allies like Poland, Romania, other Eastern European countries? Is that something people are concerned about as well?
Yeah, I mean, if you're Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, you're kind of right on the border there. This is probably making you quite nervous. If you're a member of NATO, you have something called Article 5. There's the Article 5 treaty, which says an attack upon one member is an attack upon all. So the rest of the NATO alliance has that obligation to come to your defense. So you're feeling a little more secure, but it's still unnerving.
What does the potential of sending troops to countries that aren't Ukraine meant to do to dissuade action in Ukraine?
Do you want to get into the sort of Biden responses?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
'Cause that's a piece of the puzzle. So the point Biden's trying to make here, so when he says send 1,000 to 5,000 troops to Eastern European countries, and I don't like this little tenfold anecdote that could increase tenfold, just getting slipped in there.
I used the quote from the New York Times at the end of the sentence. I almost didn't even put it in. Then I was like, "Whoa, that's just a sort of a clause that we're just as an aside here."
Yeah.
At the end of a sentence, hey, we might increase that number tenfold if things deteriorate.
Right. It's a lot.
It's a lot of people.
What they're trying to say there is, okay, Vlad, you don't like NATO on your doorstep. You feel threatened by NATO military hardware, by the growth of NATO, by its expansion eastward. Okay, you invade Ukraine, you're going to get exactly what you don't want. You're going to get more US and NATO military hardware in these countries right along your border. So the idea is kind of tell him that he's going to create the opposite effect of what he's hoping for by pushing NATO back. The Russian demands are, they want NATO to pledge to halt further eastward expansion, and they want them to pledge to not admit Ukraine. There's some more sort of specific things like removing NATO military hardware in certain Eastern European states. But what Biden is trying to say here is you're going to get the opposite of what you want in your negotiating demands if you invade Ukraine.
So we're talking about Biden actions now that could potentially deter Russian action. If Putin does invade, what do we know about the various options that the Biden administration is considering? What have they said about sanctions? What have they said about potential military options?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like a direct U.S. military response is on the table, but they have been very vocal in saying that if Russia invades, the U.S. will basically arm and support a Ukrainian insurgency, and that's kind of scary. It's surprising to me to hear them just saying that out loud.
The thing that
has not worked well for us in the past.
Well, when we've been on the
receiving end, yeah.
The receiving end. The thing that's sort of striking in the coverage is I do think that there's this kind of,
I was thinking about Syria.
There's a bias toward towards assuming that because authoritarians have kind of a strong grip over policymaking, that they have some kind of inherent strategic acumen, that they're somehow, because they're in control, that they're very smart and sophisticated in what they're trying to do. But there's also another side of this, which is that there's a lot of ways in which Vladimir Putin is striking out because he's weak, right? Because and that stretching yourself thin, invading another country, as we have learned quite recently, it may seem very masculine. It may seem like very tough and bellicose, but it doesn't redound to the benefit of your country.
Yeah, no, you could make that argument. You could make the argument that, his guy in Belarus looks weakened, his guy in Kazakhstan looks weakened, that he's now stretching himself even more thin by sending hundreds of thousands of troops to the border of Ukraine, that their primary exports are commodities like fossil fuels, and that they're looking down the road and seeing a challenging economic environment. And so they lash out and do things like this to, sort of distract from at home. I mean, you could spin this either way. I think in the near term, it's just sort of an incredibly scary, destabilizing potential action to come down the pike. And, on top of, this insurgency arming that we talked about that Biden is saying he will do if they invade. They're talking about economic sanctions. They're talking about banning certain kinds of technologies like semiconductors and these other microchips and other things. So pretty serious disruptions to just sort of like the global flow of commerce and goods. And
Well, I was going to say, I'm trying to think of from the perspective of your average American who's reading the news, thinking, as they tend to do, what does this mean for me? What could this mean? What could this change? It sounds like the Biden administration has so far ruled out like sending U.S. troops to fight alongside Ukrainians, but not arming Ukrainians potentially if there's an invasion. On the sanctions, it seems like the effect of those sanctions would not just be limited to economic fallout in Russia, but that could have an impact on the entire global economy and the U.S. economy as well. I know that like Europe, for example, like imports 40% of their energy for their natural gas from Russia.
okay, so on the energy, yes, specific on the energy point, that is a very serious concern. Like it depends on what the global impact will be. Like who knows? It depends on what the sanctions are. It depends on how far-reaching they are. It depends on the response. In terms of more narrowly, a lot of Europe's really dependent on Russian natural gas. A lot of it transits through Ukraine, and there's a real concern that as a weapon of war, they could decide to essentially cut off the export of natural gas.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is it doesn't seem like, of all the options that Biden has to respond, none of them are without potential cost to the U.S.
No, none of them are good.
This is not like a free, like, oh, we'll just send in some help here and that'll be fine and we don't have to worry about anything. Whether it's military, whether it's economic sanctions, all of them come with a potential cost directly to the United States.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly destabilizing. Energy prices could spike. I mean, remember back in 2014, that Malaysian Airlines flight was shot down over Ukraine by accident, by separatists, and not by accident, I don't know. But like, certainly they were not part of the war effort, right? It was an innocent passenger flight and a bunch of innocent people were killed. Like horrible things can happen when there's suddenly an even more active war zone. But the truth is the Ukrainians have been in like a low grade state of conflict with Russia since 2014.
Yeah. I mean, part of the reason I bring that up is because, turning to the politics of all this, many Republican politicians are unsurprisingly using the crisis to attack Biden for showing what they call weakness towards Russia and other countries. Nikki Haley's tweet summed up the argument, quote, "He was weak when the Taliban took Afghanistan. He's once again showing weakness as Russia looks to take Ukraine. And if he continues to be weak, there's no telling what China will do with Taiwan." Meanwhile, some of the MAGA extremists, like Congressman Paul Gosar and Thomas Massie, are saying that that America first means that the United States should just let Russia do whatever it wants with Ukraine. Democratic Congressman Tom Malinowski tweeted that his office is actually getting calls from Tucker Carlson viewers who are, quote, upset that we're not siding with Russia's, quote, reasonable positions towards Ukraine. First of all, let's start with the weakness attack. Do you think attacking Biden for weakness on foreign policy is an effective argument, guys?
I worry that those attacks do work. I mean, it doesn't matter how hypocritical you are. I saw Mike Pompeo's out there attacking Biden.
I know. I almost gave you the Mike Pompeo quote. Nikki Haley summed it up better, but I wanted to give you the Mike Pompeo bait, so I feel bad.
It's just amazing. That, it's like, hey, Mike, maybe if your boss hadn't been so busy trying to extort the new president of Ukraine for dirt on Joe Biden, you could have done a better job preparing for this outcome. But yeah, no, I mean, I do think that these arguments work. You always hear neocons saying like, we can't withdraw from Iraq because it will show weakness to Iran. The concepts of strong and weak are easy to explain. The more complicated story is more complicated to explain. So yeah, I'm worried.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are people like Nikki Haley and others that see an opportunity in attacking Joe Biden. And then there are people on the right that are actually a little bit more pro-Putin than they are anti-Biden right now, that they're a little bit more pro-authoritarian than they are willing to kind of use this to kind of tell a story. But I do think a lot of the, in politics, in the press, I think storytelling about foreign policy and like narratives around foreign policy kind of take over and become more important than what's actually in our interest, what's actually going on the ground. This idea that, because domestically there's Republicans telling a story that weaves Afghanistan, which is a completely different situation, with Ukraine, which is a completely different situation, than Taiwan, which is yet another different situation, as just sort of a place to talk about weakness. And as if the idea that like the U.S. doesn't have distinct sets of interest in those places. And that over time, the best thing we can do for our country is what's in our interest in each of these situations. Therefore, in order to avoid a display of weakness, we must remain in Afghanistan forever. Yeah. And that somehow makes us a better, more stable ally for a place like Taiwan, I think is like kind of absurd.
The Russians fought a long, bloody war in Afghanistan, lost, and got driven out. and it nearly bled them to death, bled them dry. I don't think they think we would have been smart to stay in Afghanistan any longer. It's like such a stupid, specious Washington argument.
Well, it's the tell in all of these arguments about weakness. You're right. Like it can be effective because it's a very simple, simplistic, almost stupid kind of attack, right? And that there is chaos in the world, and if you cannot fix the chaos single-handedly, you are weak. And in order to try to fix the chaos, you must use military might, and then you are strong. That is sort of the binary thought process there, and it's just ridiculous because along with all of these attacks about Biden being weak, very few of these Republicans, at least in Russia, have ideas or proposals of what he should do, right? Like some of them are saying, slap the sanctions on them right now, even though that sort of defeats the purpose of deterrence. But then if they do invade and then we impose sanctions, like what else do the Republicans want us to do? Do they want Joe Biden to send in troops to Ukraine? Some Republicans clearly don't.
What's sort of frustrating about this is you will have people with a straight face say, Putin's invading Ukraine because Biden looked weak in Afghanistan. And they'll blame America for, Vladimir Putin doing something he's wanted to do, we know, for a long time. But if you try to raise the question of like, okay, are there things the West has done that have exacerbated the problem, like NATO expansion, they accuse you of blaming America. And it just leads to a very stupid, very stilted conversation about these matters. And then, the most cynical thing that you're seeing are the people, a lot of Republicans, even some Ukrainian officials, criticizing the State Department for getting the families of State Department officials out of Ukraine.
They saw Alyssa Farah, a former Trump official, tweeting about that.
Yeah, who's normally like not a fire-breathing person, but it's like, hey, did you guys all forget what happened in Afghanistan this summer when a bunch of Americans got trapped there? Did we not fight about the security of diplomats in Benghazi for like the better part of a decade? Why don't we not fucking politicize this? Why don't we tell the kids and spouses of diplomats to get out as soon as possible so that they're safe?
Well, this is the danger in responding to charges of weakness, because if you respond to these phony charges of weakness by showing strength or what they consider strength, that's how escalation starts and things get, like if you feel like you always need to respond to a charge of weakness with, well, I'm now going to show you that I'm tough. That's when wars start.
But just these arguments are so powerful. Like if you look back at fights over the Panama Canal, and whether or not the U.S. would give back control of the Panama Canal to Panama, it like drove American politics in the Carter administration, and like Reagan demagogued it to the White House. These can be very simple, powerful arguments you can make, and it drives us to do crazy things.
That's what I say. That's how we end up in really bad conflicts.
But it is also because I think the Republicans criticizing this kind of stuff who aren't in power, they know that no one is going to make them follow their ideas to their logical conclusion. It's like, okay, you think it sends the wrong signal that we want to get people out, especially young people, if they're going to be in danger. Okay, then you want to defend those places? You want to send in troops? Do you want those troops to be there in case there's some sort of a conflict? Do you want those troops to fight Russian troops? Do you want to have a war with Russia?
Well, and just like what value does like a spouse of a diplomat like how is that sending a signal about anything? It's getting like the Russians just got the spouses of their diplomats out like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Right, it's acknowledging the reality of the situation.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
But I do wonder, and Lovett, you mentioned it, about this sort of divide among Republicans where there are some like your Tucker Carlsons and your Paul Gosars who are basically like, we are isolationists. America first to us means America does not get involved anywhere else. We have no business in Ukraine. Or from Tucker, you get more like, Putin's totally reasonable.
Well, I think, you have to.
So there's like a mix of pro-Putinism and traditional isolationism, which has always been a wing of the Republican Party.
Right. I think you could say that you have neocons, you have paleocons, and then you have fashcons, right? And there's really is like 3 groups now, and you have the neocons that want to they want to defend democracy, they want American foreign policy to be more bellicose, they want to kind of be as aggressive as humanly possible. You have isolationists, and then I think you do have right wingers led by people like Tucker Carlson, who's I think in Hungary as we speak, who have absorbed a lot of kind of pro-authoritarian and pro-Putin propaganda about he is this vanguard, a defense of conservative values, of traditional values. It's part and parcel of him being anti-gay. It's part of traditional gender roles and all the rest.
Yeah, sort of like a white authoritarian religious amalgamation that he likes in people like Putin
Yeah.
or Viktor Orban or others. And yeah, I mean, Tucker's trying to claim, Tucker does this sort of whataboutism, false equivalency thing where he says, if China controlled the government of Mexico, we'd be upset by that. It's like, yes, of course. But saying that Ukraine has the right to join NATO if they want is not the same as saying they're controlled by NATO. Far, far, far from it.
I don't know this for sure because we haven't seen enough polling on it yet. But if I were to bet, I would bet that the Republican base would be more with Tucker and the Paul Gosar position than it would be with the warmongers.
I think most Americans are in the isolationist camp.
Yeah, me too.
But that's which is why all the conversation that we've had and you guys have on Pod Save the World about the blob, like the blob does not actually represent most popular opinion in this country.
No, the blob is very much of the mindset that we have to be strong, and getting out of
Tough.
Afghanistan showed that we are weak, and how dare you talk about NATO expansion as a problem, right? That is a very DC thing. And I think Trump really hastened the sentiment of the Republican Party into the sort of like push them into this isolationist corner where Tucker is anyway.
Where he comes down is going to be interesting as well. I know he was interviewed by Sean Hannity over the weekend, and he spent most of the time hitting Biden on the minor incursion remark from the press conference, saying like, oh, he invited them in, he gave them the green light, which of course, smart Trump, right? He's going to do that. But then he also said, they're talking about sanctions. If you want to stop these guys, you have to talk about more than sanctions, which does make him a little different than the Tucker Carlson view. And I wonder how he'll come down on this.
I don't think he has to be against anything that Biden will do because he's going to call anything Biden does a failure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, he'll try to split the salami like he did in Afghanistan, which is say, I negotiated us getting out of Afghanistan, so I was right, and it was right to get out, but I would have taken all the equipment, and it was bad to leave the equipment, and we were humiliated in how we do it. I think what he'll probably say about Ukraine was, Obama gave them blankets and non-lethal aid. I gave them the Javelin anti-tank missiles. So I was tough on Ukraine, even though you guys impeached me over all this stuff. And Biden's just weak generally, and Putin wouldn't have done this to me, yada, yada, yada.
And he didn't in the years that I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'll do.
And that might work.
Yeah.
Oof. Fun times ahead on that one. When we come back, Lovett grills Jen Psaki with a tone that would make Peter Doocy blush.
Okay. Alrighty.
The presenting sponsor of this episode of Pod Save America is Simply Safe. If you ever wanted to make your home feel safer, there's no better time than now. Right now, our friends at Simply Safe are giving Pod Save America listeners access to all their New Year's holiday deals. New Year's holiday deals, it's January 20th. Oof. 20% off their award-winning home security, and your first month is free when you sign up for the interactive monitoring service. Lovett has Simply Safe.
I do have Simply Safe, and it works really well, and I was able to set it up myself, and it is so nice to know you can just click a button and the house has the alarm on when you're out. When Pundit's home alone, I don't have to think about it.
It's one of the biggest reasons I use the alarm. Leo's just home alone in the house. We love Simply Safe because it has everything you need to make your home safe. Indoor and outdoor cameras, comprehensive sensors, all monitored around the clock by trained professionals.
Think about how nervous you'd be if it was just Charlie and Leo alone in the house and there wasn't an alarm on. My goodness.
Just put a bowl of food out. They're fine. Anyway, they send help the instant you need it. Simply Safe was even named Best Home Security System of 2021 by U.S. News & World Report. You can easily customize the system for your home online in minutes and even get free custom recommendations. There are no long-term contracts or commitments. It's a really easy way to start feeling a bit more peace of mind in the new year. Hurry! Take 20% off your Simply Safe system, and your first month is free when you sign up for the interactive monitoring service. Visit simplysafe.com/crooked. Again, that's simplysafe.com/crooked for 20% off your entire system. Pod Save America is brought to you by Chili Sleep. Science tells us that the best way to achieve and maintain consistent deep sleep is by lowering core body temperature. Temperature-controlled sleep restores testosterone levels, repairs muscle after a hard day's work, and improves cognitive function. So you always start your day feeling sharp and alert. I think Joe Biden was using Chili Sleep before his press conference.
Oh, was he?
That's how he lasted 2 hours.
That's maybe you should make it a little bit colder.
Chili Sleep makes customizable climate-controlled sleep solutions that help you improve your entire well-being. They make the Uller and Cube sleep systems, hydro-powered, temperature-controlled mattress toppers that fit over your existing mattress to provide your ideal sleep temperature.
So my wife and I battle about temperature sometimes, but it's not a consistent battle. Like, she was turning the heat fully off at night, And the house would get down to like 60 degrees, and I would wake up so cold. So I didn't have my Uller on for a couple of nights, but then I slept so much worse because the Uller was off. So now we've found a middle.
Ronan,
Gotta put the Uller on.
I don't know why I call my wife Hannah. You guys have met her.
I get yeah.
He's like I'm talking to an anonymous audience.
Real wife guy here.
Small brunette. You've been known for
no,
10
she's
years.
always doing a Borat thing. That's me.
I have this issue where it's better to. I like sleeping cold, but then so I wake up, I start walking pundit, and while I'm out, Ronan turns the heat all the way up, and so then I walk. I'm like, I have my sweatshirt on, I have my fleece on. I come back in after the walk. I got a fucking face of scalding hot air. I want to puke every time I come into my house in the morning.
Wow.
The point is,
Ronan and Hillary like to turn up the heat.
When the Uller is on, he doesn't have to do that.
These luxury mattress pads keep your bed at the perfect temperature for deep sleep, whether you sleep hot or cold. These sleep systems are designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and give you the confidence and energy to power through your day. Imagine waking up and not feeling tired. Chilly Sleep can help make that happen. Emily can attest to this. Ours is programmed for 9 p.m. That's when the Uller goes on. And every time it goes on, I make some comment about how happy I am that the Uller just went on. You can feel it underneath you. Just a warm. It's like a cool river.
Oh yeah, sure.
Do people want to sleep in a cool river? I don't know. You do
if you're hot.
Imagine waking up and not feeling tired. Chilly Sleep can help make that happen. Head over to chillysleep.com/crooked to learn more and check out a special offer available exclusively for Pod Save America listeners and only for a limited time. That's chilly, CHILI, sleep.com/crooked to take advantage of our exclusive discount and wake up refreshed every day. Pod Save America is brought to you by Truebill. Is your ex still using your Netflix?
Sure hope
no,
not.
but he's not my ex, and he's not using it anymore, but Tommy once was using our Netflix account for quite a while.
I used John's Netflix for between 2 and 3 years until one time Emily sent me a text and said, will you get off our goddamn Netflix? I want to watch something.
Yeah, that's when it ended.
Remember when your brother wouldn't let me use his Wi-Fi password?
Yeah, I do. You ask him about that today, he and Andy and Molly still laugh about it. I think they have no regrets.
It was one of the craziest things a neighbor's ever done in my whole life. No. It's like, hey, the cable company is going to be installing the internet tomorrow. Can I borrow your Wi-Fi password just so I can have internet for my first night at my new house as your next door neighbor? No.
Anyway,
think about it sometimes.
If anyone is using your services or you have subscriptions that you don't use anymore yourself, you should look at Truebill. It's the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 per year with Truebill. Because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel, Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. And your Truebill concierge is there when you need them to cancel unwanted subscriptions so you don't have to. I've used Truebill. It's very easy to use. It works very well. Suddenly, you're not paying $5, $6, $7, $10 a month for subscriptions that you didn't even know you had. It's great. Truebill has over 2 million users and helped save them over $100 million, like Matthew B., who says, in a matter of seconds, I saved $660 for the year on my DirecTV bill. How about that? Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/crooked. Go right now, truebill.com/crooked. It could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/crooked.
It's been 1 year since President Joe Biden was inaugurated, and the classic gift to mark a 1-year anniversary is, of course, an unyielding river of shit. Joining us now, she is the White House press secretary and friend of the pod, Jen Psaki. Jen, welcome back.
Thank you. That was quite an introduction. I don't know how to follow that now, but you're going to ask me a question about the river of S. Bleep, bleep, bleep you just raised.
I was creating a space so that you didn't have to acknowledge it. So how was President Biden's come down after the 2-hour press conference? And how soon into the 2-hour press conference did the post-it that said, "What are Republicans for?" fall off?
Well, I will say that I think the big takeaway, hopefully after the dust settled from the press conference and the record-breaking nature of it, was that he's ready to draw some contrast with the Republicans and make clear what we're for and what our plan is and how we're going to make people's lives better and how they have no plan. The cupboard is bare, as some might say. So he did make that point several times, but it was a 2-hour press conference.
Did he accidentally take an Adderall that Don Jr. left behind? Like what? About like 90 minutes in, were you surprised by how long it was going?
I was in the back and I was thinking, do I cut this off? He seems to be having a good time. He's calling on nearly everyone in the room. So yes, I did have that go through my mind. But what I see here every day, which is so funny because there's been so much focus on when will he have a press conference and we need a formal press conference, which I don't think people in their homes are really thinking about every single day. But he takes questions nearly every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I remember the first or second time I traveled with him, he did 3 avails on the trip. And I thought, am I going to be fired? Is this, but he enjoys that back and forth. And I think what people saw was some of that for a long time.
So I want to talk about the kinds of questions he gets, kind of questions you get. I watched your briefing today, and I have to come back to this Doocy kid. So here's my question. He always puts out a gotcha question.
Mm-hmm.
Like today, he basically asked 2. One was, does President Biden think parents should be under the boot of nameless bureaucrats when it comes to their children's education? And the other was, does President Biden think crime is good? You do not fall for any of this bait, to your credit. Though I think someone much worse at your job would also not fall for these questions. Are you worried that he's not adjusting? That there's not a new strategy to try to catch you in some kind of a gotcha question?
You know, I am not here to work for Peter Doocy or Fox. But I will say that, if you look at how it's portrayed and how my answers are portrayed, even when I say, no, we don't think crime is good, and here's all the things we've done, including the thing that makes, makes Republicans crazy, just anecdotally by the hate tweets I get on Twitter when I say this, is that they voted against funding for local cops programs because of the American Rescue Plan. Also that Biden has supported $300 billion more in funding. And at the same time, he also thinks we need police reform. It's like they don't know what to do with that. But every time we say that, it makes them crazy. I think it speaks to, if you look at Fox on a daily basis, I mean, do you remember the 4 boxes that we had on all the TVs, right? Which is on my TV right now. So right now, just to give you a sense, so CNN, Pentagon, as many as 8,500 US troops on heightened alert. Okay, true. Same on MSNBC. CNBC is doing their own thing about the market. And then on Fox is Jeanine Pirro talking about soft on crime consequences. I mean, what does that even mean? Right. So there's an alternate universe on some coverage. What's scary about it is a lot of people watch that and they think that the president isn't doing anything to address people's safety in New York. And that couldn't be farther than the truth for other places.
Yeah, there's I was thinking about this during that press conference. I was thinking about it during your briefings, which is there is this distinction, right? Trump could go out there and he can just take credit for anything good, cast blame for anything bad. But the big difference is Trump cares most about media that wants him to succeed. And I think Democrats, we care most about media that doesn't really care if we succeed or fail, but is sort of biased towards negativity for Democrats, negativity for Republicans. The president talked in that press conference about hitting the road. I think implicit in that is that it's kind of hard to get the message out through the normal channels available to you. How are you thinking about that now as we head into 2022?
Yeah, so true. Everything you said. Look, I think there's a reality of this. There's like a passion for panic. I don't even know what to call it out there. And, you look at some of the things. Are there challenges and things that have not gone well? Yes, I will acknowledge that. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But there are things like nothing on the shelves. You cannot find anything on the shelves when statistically 88% or 89% of shelves are stocked, right? So that's a little, there are things like that there's always a little element of panic that people are looking for, or, nobody's vaccinated. It's a disaster. Nobody will get vaccinated. 87% of the country has gotten at least 1 dose. A lot of those people don't like the president or me or you or, anyone we know. So there's a pursuit of that, which is a reality that is challenging, but we're not going to solve on our own. So what we're trying to do is really think about how to get the president, you engage, of course, the White House press corps is hugely important. It's not that, but figure out how to get him outside of the box of Washington, right? It's interesting when you have him engaging, and this is not only for him, this is what's true of our former boss, former President Obama as well, and others. when you get them out in a town hall meeting, right? Or you get them out and they have a conversation at a grocery store or at an ice cream shop, the conversation is more likely about things that are actually impacting people's lives. The same as of local media interviews. Local media is still one of the most trusted sources of information. There's also, and it's so funny because I remember when we did some of this, it was so controversial. Like we weren't, back in the Obama days where we were just like not respecting the sanctity of the presidency, where doing something like a podcast or Pod Save America, right? Or doing engagements with digital figures was something so outlandish and kind of out of the ordinary.
Right.
But also, let's be real, more people listening, more people viewing, more people consuming that information about what's actually happening in their lives than is necessarily in every cable chyron every day. And so it's trying to, kind of move outside of that and get him out in the country more, which again, we're not the first White House to think about that and talk about that, but it's something he loves. He lights up. I think he could spend every day on the road if that was possible in his schedule.
I remember there was a selfie stick fiasco, and then there was also a YouTuber, and there was like a bathtub filled with glitter.
It was so controversial.
Yes, it was a big deal at the time. But yeah, you have to do all of it. I mean, that's the thing. And also our jobs here is to reach the American public. It's not to do it through specific forums, and you have to do it through lots of forums. So obviously there's this bias towards controversy, this bias towards negativity in the press. But on the other hand, it does seem as though a lot of our listeners, I think, feel pretty discouraged right now. They see some dismal polling. They're waiting on tests in the mail during this Omicron wave. They see 2 Democrats stalling the president's agenda. They see foreign policy crises, and they're worried not because they think Joe Biden is magical, but because they believed us when we said that democracy depends on President Biden and Democrats delivering. What do you say to those listeners?
I say a couple things. We feel your frustration and understand it. And we sit in it too sometimes, right? We're frustrated that voting rights didn't get passed. I mean, how is that even why would anyone be opposed to protecting voting? It doesn't even make sense, right? You have these 16 Republican senators who have supported it in the past, and now all of a sudden they don't. I mean, Mitch McConnell wrote about it in his book. He was so proud of his support for voting rights, right? So some of it also doesn't make sense. I don't know I'm not saying that's the only driver of it, but it's like, it feels like, how could anyone oppose these things that seem so common sense? What I would say is that things are going to get better. And on COVID, which we know is the root frustration for everybody, for good reason. If you look at it and you're a scientist, there's that. But also just as a human being, you want to go out to restaurants, you want to go to concerts, you want to not wear a mask everywhere. Everybody's sick and tired of this. I am all with you. We are all with you. And the good news, if we can just look for a little bit of good news, is that we're seeing peaks of Omicron in lots of parts of the country, not everywhere, and it's starting to come down. Also, in this period of time, as much as we know we should have done more on tests earlier, we are going to be at a point, and we're almost there, where people should be able to get tests in their pharmacies. They should be able to get reimbursed for them. They can order tests online. They can go to testing centers, and they should be more available. Same with masks. We also just ordered a massive supply of antivirals, which is this pill that is a game changer. And it's going to take some time to get a huge enough dose available, but we're going to have all these ways of treating it. So we're not going to live like this forever. And I think, and we think, and the polls, I think, show us that this is a huge driver of people's psychology, right? I'm the child of a therapist, so maybe I'm going to go there for a second, but it impacts your mental health, right? Even if you feel like, it's impacting everybody. And that's a reality too. I'd also say, and, you and I have lived through this too, and the many uses of the arc of I'm going to butcher this thing. You know what I'm trying to say? The
moral arc of the universe.
The moral arc.
It's long.
It bends towards justice, right? Okay, You're the speechwriter, so I'm going to just tap into it's like a phone
long time ago.
It's a phone a friend, but that's also true, right? And we can't. I mean, voting rights is such a good example. This is not now that we just give up. This is now when we figure out what's next and what the next path is. The last thing I would say is, it is frustrating we can't get our agenda passed, all of it. We've gotten a lot passed, even with the majority. The majority is so narrow. And we knew that would be a challenge from the beginning, but this in some ways is a tough, I mean, in many ways, it's a really tough experience, right? Because we feel like we have Democrats. Why can't we push this through? And because we need every single one of them. That's how Congress was designed, how that branch of government was designed. So this should also be a motivational tool for having more people that we can lean on as another thing. So I guess I'm an optimist by nature, but it's going to get better. It's freezing cold here and we're still fighting a pandemic, and meat is still too expensive in the grocery store, but we're moving in a better direction. And I think that often, hopefully, will be the driver of people feeling like there's good days ahead.
Yeah, I do think about how much just the middle of last year just passed a massive relief bill. It was before Delta, and we were heading into this fight over Build Back Better. The only question was how big it would be.
Yeah.
And I think there was some assumption, I think it was something shared by a lot of people, that there's a version that will get Manchin and Sinema to yes. And we don't know what that version is, but we have to negotiate and push and put our best foot forward. And at the end of the day, they will come to a yes on something. And right now, we still haven't gotten that yes. Today, there was a meeting on an electoral count act reform. There's been some question about what exactly Joe Manchin is for in terms of the chunk that he would get behind.
Yeah.
What happens now? A big chunk. Do we now just say to Joe Manchin, like, you write the fucking bill? What happens?
I wouldn't say that myself exactly in those words, as much as I had my statement from a few weeks ago. I think a lot of this is, you heard the president say last week in the press conference that he doesn't want to be the legislator in chief, right? And he doesn't. And what that means is he's not going to spend his time behind closed doors for hours at end in the Oval Office, meeting and negotiating with senators. They legislate themselves. That's what the branch of government does. We have a very experienced legislative staff. They'll work with them when they need to. So ultimately, it's never going to be a bill that's just by one senator, whether it's Joe Manchin or not. But they will have to work out what they can get agreement on. Now, here's the good news. I'm just going to go to like the place of light of every now and then for you. Is there's agreement about some basic overarching themes, right? That we have to do something on climate. Agreed, right? We had a historic investment in there. There's agreement on cutting the cost of childcare, universal pre-K. That's a hugely important part of that. Not that we would be satisfied with that alone, but creating universal pre-K program would be a historic thing to happen, even on its own. And there's agreement about negotiating the price of prescription drugs. There's more beyond that there's lots of support for, and there'll be discussion about. But there's some key components that across the board, and for raising taxes on the highest income. So that's a good baseline, right? Something beyond that, something about that. But they have to figure out what we have 50 votes for, and then we have to get it across the finish line. But we're working on that. We're not giving up. We're still working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I know from our time working for President Obama that the State of the Union isn't just a deadline for the public; it's an internal deadline too. It's a kind of, and especially in a midterm election, this is one of, if not the last chance for a president to have an audience of the entire country to make a case. Is there some sense that is a deadline for getting pieces of Build Back Better through the Senate, or at least to have a plan or something we could say like, this is what we'll be bragging about when we start traveling the country this summer?
I think we see it more as kind of a kickoff than an end, right? I'm not saying we're not going to talk about Build Back Better and the components between now and then. There'll be lots of conversation about it. But the thing about the State of the Union, that even with all of the changing dynamics of media and how people consume information, is it's one of the only times every year that, as you said, people are listening to the president. So it's kind of laying out to the public where you are, but also where are you going from here? Kind of who are we and what are we fighting for? And you're giving direction to your party and to Congress as well. So I don't think we look at it as a deadline or the end of anything, right? We'll see. There's obviously a lot that needs to happen in terms of funding the government, over the next several weeks. Also, there's this bill you see got very poorly named, but the most important thing about it is got a lot of funding for chips for cars to make them less expensive. those are a lot of things that will happen, and we're going to see what's possible in these conversations. But we don't think of it as a deadline or the end. We think of it as kind of like a launch. So yeah, people will hear like where we go from here.
So I wanted to ask about Ukraine in part because I do think that like this has been a year defined by crises and the press and Republicans laying them at the feet of President Biden, and then the Biden administration demonstrating agency where possible, whether it's around inflation or COVID, foreign policy crisis. A lot of people see reports about a potential invasion. It looks frightening. It looks dangerous. But a lot of times the press skips a step about why it's important, what it means for the U.S., why this is of such great interest to our foreign policy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. Look, I think that we are not talking about sending U.S. troops to the border of Ukraine and Russia. So it's not, as people think about our engagement in a war like they would in other scenarios. And that's an important thing for people to understand. But to your point, there's a basic values proposition here, right? And the president has talked a lot about democracies versus autocracies. There also is a value that the United States has long been a subscriber, an advocate, a leader on, that you can't just go and invade and take another country's territory, right? That's not how it should work. And so the challenge here, which is honestly challenging to communicate, is that we know that President Putin and the Russians are going to make a decision about which path, which choose your own adventure they're going to take, right? And that what we can do is lay out what the consequences will be. But the reason we've been so strongly out there on this is because this is about sending a clear message with partners around the world about who we are and what we should stand for. And we don't stand for other countries invading one country invading other countries or trying to steal their territory. And we don't stand for what they've also been doing, which is pushing what we call false flag operations, where they are spreading misinformation to lay the predicate for them to do exactly that. So it is about something bigger than that, even though we know that it's really ultimately up to President Putin to decide what step he takes.
I started by referring to a certain kind of river, obviously as a joke, but also like presidents are expected to have agency over all things in the press, in the public. And when a presidency is confronted by so many big crises at once, an economic crisis, a COVID, foreign policy crises, a crisis in our democracy, there is an expectation, especially on the part of the press, that any problem is a problem the president owns, and any failure to make things better is something they're responsible for. Obviously, that's not always true, and you have to push back and say, here's where our power is, here's where it isn't, here's what the Fed can do about inflation, here's what the president can do. But then there's a risk in that of seeming like an observer, of seeming like a passenger to events. How do you think about that? How do you make sure you're conveying, like, here's where the actual authority is, right? This isn't we don't have a dictator. Here's where it isn't, without seeming like you're kind of giving into events.
Right. Or without over explaining. I mean, you and I both know there's nothing, any elected official I've ever worked for, and maybe this is an endearing quality that they have, they want to explain everything, right? Which, I admire. But, there's also a reality that the pace is never going to be the pace that is going to meet the demands of the press corps, but also meet the demand and sometimes of the public, right? If you look at inflation, the Federal Reserve, as you mentioned, it's under their purview. They're predicting it's going to moderate this year. That's a good thing. They have tools they can use. They're independent. They do their own thing. We don't control that, right? There are things, and it's kind of the thing that's been, I think, frustrating, or maybe we could all do better at, including how people cover this, is when we talk about inflation, what do we mean? We're talking about how costs impact people, the public, right? It's not all because of one issue. There are lots of different issues that impact. So this is where I get into the explaining, but I'm going to do a very shorthand version of this. As an example, the supply chain, right? One issue, big issue. We never talked about this for years. Now it's become such a big issue, which the supply chain is overall good because overall it lowers our costs. But COVID has a huge impact, because if a manufacturing place shuts down in Malaysia or China and they're not making a piece of a pencil, then we're not going to get those pencils, right? And also people are buying tons of goods. So we've had to do a lot to ease that. That's working. That's moving in a better direction. That's good. That is why we're getting shelves stocked and why things are getting better. But there are two other big issues. One is the competition. So meat is my favorite example of this.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to go make chili because it's cold here, although you live in a warm climate, so maybe you're making hamburgers. I don't know. Now I'm feeling jealous.
It's freezing here. It's almost 60.
Oh my God, stop. I'm sad right now. I'm wearing Uggs and under my desk. That is about meat companies taking advantage of people thinking prices are higher and raising their prices. That is a different issue, right? So, and then the third thing is cars, and that accounts for about 1/3 of inflationary pressures. And it's expensive to buy a car these days, right? But that's because we don't have enough manufacturing chips in the country, which is something we have to solve longer term, and why we got to pass this bill so we have more chips so we can sell more cars. Meaning it's kind of complicated in some ways to explain, but the more we can tell people, okay, cars, they're expensive, here's because of what? Competition, they're taking advantage of this. And there are some bad actors that are taking advantage of everybody thinking prices are high, they're terrible. And some of it is inflationary pressure, but that's a challenge, and that doesn't always fit into a tweet or kind of a short, 30-second soundbite, which is part of the challenge.
How annoying was that pushback from economists on it may be going too far to talk about competition when it comes to high prices?
I'm like, no. There's some days where you just think don't die on that hill. So I think that was not advice I took. I'll just say I think the meat example is one people can completely relate to, right? Because if you do grocery shopping for your family, for your couple, whatever your life, your roommates, that they're more expensive. And then this is why. It's not because of some mysterious inflationary thing out there.
Last question. End of the day, what are you streaming to fall asleep?
Can I also ask you for recommendations too? Because streaming to fall asleep.
Or to stay awake, whatever you're using streaming to do, that's good. That's allowed.
So, I watched Doocy on Hulu over Christmas. It's very good. It's a little dark. Yeah, I couldn't sleep some nights. It's not helping me sleep.
Just to chill out.
Was not helping me sleep. Okay, fair. I also just finished Emily in Paris, and
Tommy's favorite show.
I love Emily. Oh, fair. Okay. I also love, I've been watching Queer Eye. I need a little shows that I cry every Queer Eye episode, which I don't know what that says about me. I just love the journey that they're on. But I've also watched a lot of football lately, which surprises me a little bit, but it's a good sports is an exciting escape. And I'll be watching everything in the Olympics. What about you? What are you streaming? Now I need recommendations.
Yesterday, it was Sunday afternoon, and Ronan and I went to eat lunch at a restaurant outside. And when we got there, they said, "I'm sorry, we're not doing any outside seating right now because of the game. The big game is on." And Ronan said, "What kind of game?" Which I thought was we don't know about the games. I'm in a drag race place. That's what's happening. We're watching season after season of Drag Race. I have caught up to season 14, which is currently airing. We're about to finish.
Okay. 14 seasons. Now, this is the kind of thing I need,
Listen,
just
here's what I would say. I would recommend starting with season 3 and just cruise 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is just a murderer's row of Drag Race seasons. Then we'll talk about All Stars. If you get to that point, we can talk about All Stars, but I would not recommend All Stars until you've gotten into the kind of the heart of the original. You know what I mean?
Well, I have a lot of streaming to do. The good news is that it's 20 degrees here and I have 2 small children. So I can stream things.
That's great.
So
and I like the idea.
I take my homework seriously.
I think exposing kids to queer culture as early as possible is very important. So as long as they're in the vicinity, if they can hear it, that'd be very exciting too.
Okay, done.
Jen Psaki, everybody, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Pod Save America is brought to you by Imperfect Foods. Here's a cringeworthy stat to start 2022. Each year, 35% of the food supply goes unsold or uneaten in the U.S., but Imperfect Foods is working to turn this around by sourcing foods that would otherwise fall through the cracks of our food system. I don't know if that's a cringeworthy stat. It's certainly it's a little upsetting.
Well, cringe has taken on a new meaning, right? Where it's sort of lame versus upsetting stat. You know what I mean?
Is it like chuggy?
You're Judy.
What
for
is
saying
cringe?
that.
What is, there needs to be like a
Cringe.
Susan Sontag type essay that's like on cringe.
I feel like it would be just more of a visual sort of a PowerPoint, like presentation of memes that are in fact
Presentation of
cringe.
memes.
Yeah.
Imperfect Foods is a grocery delivery service offering an entire line of sustainable groceries that taste delicious and reduced waste just by embracing the natural imperfections in food. And who among us don't have natural imperfections?
I like my food with that surgery that pulls the eyes back. It's sort of a cat.
Very Los Angeles type food. Visit imperfectfoods.com to see if they deliver in your area. Once you sign up, you can personalize your weekly grocery order with fresh seasonal produce, pantry staples, and yummy snacks. Plus, your order will arrive on the same day each week, making it easy to build a stress-free routine. On average, Imperfect Foods customers save 6 to 8 pounds of food with every order. And unlike on-demand delivery companies, Imperfect delivers weekly by neighborhood, a unique model that produces 25 to 75% fewer emissions than individual trips to the grocery store. Plus, say goodbye to packaging guilt. Imperfect Foods is the only national grocery delivery company that makes it easy to return your packaging after every order.
You just roll them up to your door.
Just roll them to your door.
Just chuck a couple loose tomatoes.
Look, I think we've all tried Imperfect Foods, and, we like those ugly potatoes.
They cook up delicious. They're
We like
it's-
them. Uglier
yes.
the better.
Ugly tomatoes taste better.
I won't eat a potato if it doesn't look like Dom DeLuise.
Right now, Imperfect Foods is offering our listeners 20% off your first 4 orders when you go to imperfectfoods.com and use promo code CROOKED. Again, 20% off your first 4 orders. That's up to an $80 value at imperfectfoods.com when you use promo code CROOKED. Join the movement at imperfectfoods.com and use code CROOKED. Pod Save America is brought to you by BetterHelp. Is something preventing you from achieving your goals? What interferes with your happiness? Guys,
The Buffalo Bills.
the Buffalo Bills.
Treating the fact that as a country, we don't really care as much about democracy as we thought once half the elites in this country abandoned it as an idea worth caring about. And all of that being turned into sort of a bitter dispute about what Biden is or isn't doing right. Not that Biden is doing everything right, but deeper problems are creating this current fucking challenge in politics. And it's time we're honest about it. That's what my problem is today.
When
Also, this weather.
when Waze makes you try to take a left onto Wilshire when you have to cross
They
traffic.
love a left on Wilshire. They love a left on Wilshire without a
cross, like,
left.
3
take
lanes.
a left on Wilshire.
At 4
Anyway,
o'clock,
I'm sure that there are therapists through BetterHelp
trained in traffic.
that can deal with all of these problems. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can connect in a safe and private online environment. It's so convenient. You don't have to talk about your problems on a podcast that other people listen to. Best of all, you can start communicating in under 48 hours. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online. You can send a message to your counselor anytime. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, all without ever having to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. The service is available for clients worldwide. Find the particular expertise you need online. Don't limit yourself to the counselors located near you. Licensed professional counselors who are specialized in everything from depression, anxiety, trauma, grief, self-esteem. Anything you share is confidential.
Here's the thing. If you're hearing this and you're not in therapy, that's a mistake that you're making. And if you can afford it, and if your insurance can cover it too, get yourself some therapy. You won't regret it. I don't know anybody in my life ever that has said, I regret going to therapy. And they all say the same thing. Why was I not doing this all along?
BetterHelp. Convenient, professional, affordable. In fact, so many people have been using it, they're recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. We want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at betterhelp.com/PSA. Join over 1 million people who've taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's betterhelp, HELP.com/PSA. Pod Save America is brought to you by Just Egg. New year, new eggs. That's a thing people say, right?
New year, new eggs.
The new you doesn't do cholesterol in their omelets. I could cut down on cholesterol a little bit. This new you doesn't contribute to the industrial egg industry's mega polluting impact on the world. Whoa, got a little heavy there.
Wow. Taking on big egg today.
Yeah, a lot of bad eggs in that industry.
Big chicken. The new you wants a breakfast that does good and actually tastes good. That's where our next sponsor, Just Egg, comes in. Just Egg is a cholesterol-free, plant-based egg that will give you the most decadent quiches of your life.
Hey,
That's quite a promise.
decadent quiches.
Yeah, okay, here we go again. The fluffiest scrambles and the easiest egg sandwiches of all time. It has about the same protein as a chicken egg and less saturated fat. Plus, Just Egg is packed with cholesterol-lowering polyunsaturated fat. Chicken eggs wish they were this healthy. Oh, and because Just Egg comes from plants, you're also helping to save our planet. So that's nice if you're into the whole saving the planet thing. Just Eggs are great. I've tried them. They taste just like regular eggs, except you're saving the planet and you're healthier. So what's the downside?
They're not as good for Halloween.
They're not as good for throwing it
at your neighbor's house, but for everything else.
I don't know. I mean, put in a little water balloon.
You could do that.
Oh, wow.
Just a little extra effort.
Either way, show off the new cholesterol-free you by buying a bottle of Just Egg today and doing the planet a solid all at the same time. Just Egg. Really good eggs. Before we go, there have obviously been quite a few headlines lately that don't instill a lot of confidence about the future of democracy. But which stories should you really worry about? Which ones should you sort of worry about? And which ones can you safely avoid clicking altogether? We will help you figure it all out in a new segment we're calling Democracy Doomscroll. I'll tee up the headline, and the three of us will rate it on the following scale. 1, keep scrolling. 2, wouldn't lose sleep over it. 3, would lose sleep over it. 4, experiment with a new drug. 5, have you considered Canada?
Just consider it.
You guys ready?
Yeah. Sure.
All right. First headline is from USA Today, and it reads, Newt Gingrich, January 6th committee, investigators may face jail. That's right. During a Fox News interview on Sunday, the former speaker and presidential candidate actually said that if Republicans take control of Congress in the midterms, the members of the January 6th Select Committee could face jail time. Take a listen.
You're going to have a Republican majority in the House and a Republican majority in the Senate. And all these people who've been so tough and so mean and so nasty are going to be delivered subpoenas for every document, every conversation, every tweet, every email. When you have a Republican Congress, this is all going to come crashing down. And the wolves are going to find out that they're now sheep. And they're the ones who are, in fact, going to, I think, face a real risk of jail.
Newt thinks you need to subpoena tweets. Feels like there's a faster way to
I didn't even think about
get at those.
I didn't think about that part.
You know, happy 30th anniversary to Newt Gingrich launching a campaign to become Speaker of the House in 1994. It is 30 years ago. Bill Clinton wins,
20, yeah.
And now we're in this is the cycle.
This is when he was getting ready for
This is the cycle.
Would they win 54 House seats, 9 Senate seats?
And I was thinking as I saw Newt, I was like, wow, he really did usher in this horrible era. Yeah. He really did.
Yeah.
Credit to Newt.
I think you can pinpoint it.
Yeah.
You can pinpoint
He's
it
bad.
with Newt.
Remember when he was sitting on a couch with Nancy Pelosi talking about climate change, I believe?
Yeah, lots changed
Those were the
since
days.
2005.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a while.
They were.
days.
It's wild. Yeah, they were climate change. The Voting Rights Act was passed unanimously. Immigration reform was bipartisan. It was really.
He was an almost successful presidential candidate in 2012.
Yeah, but that's because he wasn't crazy enough.
I'm not losing sleep over this.
No.
Because I'm not an investigator on the Hill. I also like he's just
Adam Schiff, we might bump you up to would lose sleep.
yeah,
over
you
it.
might go to 3. I mean, like I do think it's clear that they view politics as just about reprisal and punishing the guys who went after you. Trump says it all the time too. I mean, this doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I was gonna say the only reason I wouldn't do a keep scrolling is because, like, look, it's never good when a prominent person in one party is saying that people in the other party could probably face jail time. I don't think that's good. But like what he's saying there is just like, yeah, so if they take control, they're going to subpoena all the people on the committee, which I'm sure if the people on the committee get that subpoena, they will comply because that's usually what people do who aren't like right-wing crazies. And then they'll comply and then that'll be it. Then they won't go to jail.
I wouldn't lose sleep over Newt sucking. I would lose sleep over the fact that it would probably be a huge applause line. And if I were Adam Schiff, I would experiment with a new drug, and that drug would be just ground chuck.
Wait, this was sort of adjacent to a lot of the rhetoric you saw out of the like insane anti-vax Lollapalooza over the weekend in Washington, D.C., where there were just like constant speeches about punishing, locking up.
We should have.
Their
that would have been a
enemies.
good story to do for this. That one I would have given. I would have maybe given that one experiment with a new drug.
Right. Well, you had Robert F.
Don't have to ask me
Kennedy.
twice.
You would have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. saying, at least in World War II, you could hide like Anne Frank, apparently not knowing how that ended.
Didn't read the end of the
which
book.
was insane.
Didn't finish the book.
JFK Jr. must be turning over in his bed, seeing what his nephew is up to.
Jesus. And then you had other speakers.
Because he's alive.
Other speakers talking about like executing their enemies, including the press. So yeah, there's a real scary streak in these.
That was not
folks.
a good. That was worse than the Gingrich thing.
It's not. You can't just. They're not talking about just being anti-vaccine and not having vaccine mandates. They want to punish the people who believe in those things.
And it's a lot of people, and there are a lot of people that Trump is going to want their votes. So good luck, everybody.
The second headline is from Politico. Read the never-issued Trump order that would have seized voting machines. By the way, happy 15th to Politico. I know they were celebrating themselves over the weekend.
So
many times. So much celebration.
So funny to have like 6 big pieces by Politico about how great Politico was.
You know what? As we approach our 5-year anniversary, Crooked, I support anything you do to blow out an anniversary. Shame on the two of you for going after a fellow journalist. I can't even continue it.
So here's the story, by the way. It was a good story. Politico does good reporting. Sometimes. Apparently, the January 6th committee has obtained a never-released draft executive order that would have directed the defense secretary to seize voting machines and appoint a special counsel to investigate the 2020 election, a move that could have kept Trump in power until at least mid-February. Seize voting machines. It's not clear who wrote it, but Politico notes that it's consistent with proposals that Sidney Powell made to Trump after the election. The memo also included references to 2 classified documents, which meant the author had access to that information. Sounds like a doozy. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's Canada. That's a full-on. That's what happens in places like Egypt, where they declare a state of the emergency and the military takes to the streets and clears out the protesters, and then you're in a dictatorship. It didn't happen.
It didn't happen. I'm going to say, just for the purposes of our conversation, I'm going to say might lose sleep over it, might experiment with a new drug.
Which one?
Well, let's work on finding a new drug. Come up with a list of new drugs. We'll see what's on there. What was I going to say?
Something for restless leg syndrome.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Hydroxychloroquine. What was it? Oh, here's what I was going to say.
Are you on one now?
What I was going to say. No, I'm not.
Know.
I'm not.
It's 4:30.
It's Monday.
Hey, it's 2 a.m. somewhere.
Kiev.
What I was going to say is only that it reads like the ramblings of a very bad lawyer, because you send that to the Defense Department. They're like, I think that like the memo represents a grave crisis and a consider Canada situation, but the actual memo itself kind of points to the intersection of the evil and the incompetence that went into this whole whole operation, because it's like, okay, I don't have people that can do that. I'm the Secretary of Defense. I work at the Pentagon. I'm going to have to do what it's like. The idea of this defense secretary acting on this crazy memo is probably a reason it's a draft and not something that happened. That's no cause for comfort, but I'm just taking the other side.
I understand. I mean, I think I'm somewhere between experimenting with a new drug and Canada. Maybe I'm going to experiment with a new drug in Canada. Because I think like
Putin.
The reason it didn't happen, the reason nothing worse happened, is because the Trump administration was staffed with like a bunch of really crazy Trump loyalists and some just like regular people, right? Like we don't have to. They're not heroes. Whatever. They're regular.
And here's the thing: they're not heroes.
And there were enough people, like for example, Mike Pence deciding not to try to overturn the election, right?
Yeah,
like,
caught a break
Mike
there.
Pence isn't a hero, but we caught a break there. So there were enough people that prevented Trump from doing the unthinkable. The next Trump administration, if there is one, you could imagine being staffed with just the fucking crazies.
Just on juniors.
Pure crazy. Defense Department, State Department, AG's office, all of them. And someone writes that memo and he actually does it next time.
Well, that's the mission.
That's the worry.
That's like the Bannon mission right now, is just to purge all the normals.
You might say it like
election
this.
officials, etc.
The Trump administration went from people who thought Mike Pence was a bad hang to people who thought he was a good hang. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. That's a good joke.
Wow. That's it. We're done with that one.
That's a great joke.
We can't improve upon that.
That's pretty good.
The last headline is from CNN, and it reads, DeSantis's proposed election police force alarms voting rights advocates. I don't know why I think that's funny. It's just like, oh, does it?
Yeah. Oh, no shit, really?
Like, what year are we? DeSantis's proposed election police force. So the story is about how the Florida governor has asked the Florida legislature for $5.7 million to create a new Office of Election Crimes and Security, a 52-member team, including 20 police officers, that would report to DeSantis himself and have the power to, quote, investigate, detect, apprehend, and arrest anyone for an alleged violation of election laws. How fun is that? Great idea, right? What do you guys think?
I can see it going either way. Here's my thinking. I'll tell you my I'm of two minds. On the one hand, I think to myself, hey, this is all shadowboxing. There is no massive electoral fraud problem in any part of this country. And if you want to go ahead and create a police force designed to go after the incredibly rare event of election fraud, that's a better use of their kind of political capital than what they're doing to restrict the right to vote, right? Like, if that's what you think is a way to assuage the kind of Trump wing of your base, Ron DeSantis, on your epic quest to become the next Trump, okay, like I'm not as worried about that as I am about other things. And then I remember that at the same time, the people who have there are people that and then I worry. Let me say this, but then I also obviously I worry about what happens if these kinds of forces are stacked with the kinds of people that'd be very interested in getting assigned a right-wing anti-voting task force, and I worry what those people would do with authority, and I worry what it would be if it's taken to its logical extreme. That's all.
Yeah, it's like, what are these people doing all day? There's 20 cops, like 30 investigators, kind of.
Yeah, 30 people who've had who are experienced, use that term loosely, in election law, and then 20 police officers. Here,
there's like 20 million people in Florida.
Well, I was going to say, so
stretch the touch spin.
Also, you read through the story, and towards the end of the story, it notes that every police officer in Florida or anywhere else at this point already has the authority,
of course,
to investigate
enforce
and prosecute.
Because they're crimes, of course.
Laws. So it really,
it's a task force, right? Let's focus on that.
Yeah, it is something to burnish DeSantis's credibility with the base even more. So he wants to run for president, so it's a complete stunt. Now, is it a good thing to have, like you said, 52 extra people in Florida paid by the state whose job it is to just sit every day and make up fucking election fraud? No, that's not a good thing. But is this like Ron DeSantis raising an army to go arrest voters? Like,
and I will say one other thing I'll say too is I think the reason for it to be really
trash.
The reason for it to be concerning is one thing that we have seen is because of the kind of vim and vigor with which these people have embraced like misinformation, that there's some grand schemes against of grand voters fraud schemes going on across the country. Is what inevitably happens is somebody who's on parole, person of color, screws up, they get the fucking book thrown at them. There are people that are rotting in jail because they made a mistake and voted in violation of a rule they didn't understand, and all of a sudden they're targeted and pointed as an example of the wretched voter fraud that stole the election. And then you have this group of this task force led by the governor kind of looking for examples, people that they can make examples of, and that is really worrying too.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's so awful in Florida is, in 2018, you have like 65% of the state voting to approve an amendment that would have restored voting rights to 1.5 million Floridians, something like that, who had felony convictions and who completed their terms. And then DeSantis basically puts all these hurdles in place. You have to pay off all these fines. They create this Kafka system where you can't even figure out how much you owe, and they basically just completely blocked the will of the people and left these folks fully disenfranchised. Like, that to me is an absolute travesty of justice, and is the thing that would be, that's my move to Canada in terms of Florida.
Well, I was just saying, what else would have re-enfranchised all those formerly incarcerated Americans in Florida and everywhere else? The Freedom to Vote Act.
Yeah, or beating Ron DeSantis.
Ron DeSantis. I'm gonna give it. I'm gonna experiment with a new drug.
I'm gonna say wouldn't lose sleep over it. But I got my eye on it.
Yeah, we got our eye on it. We got to keep an eye
on it.
Watching it.
And look, if you are concerned about any of these stories, the best thing you can do, if you want to experiment with a new drug, that's on you. I would stay here and not really go to Canada. And I would go to votesaveamerica.com and see how you can help win elections in 2022, because that's how you're actually going to stop all these things.
You can do both. You do some ayahuasca, and then you start rolling calls, and you're like, "Hi, is Marjorie Smith there? Are you aware that they're all horses?
Did you see that?
All of our opponents are horses now."
Here's a question I know the answer to. Did you read Matthew McConaughey's book?
I did not. I missed it.
I'm pretty sure there's a story in there of him taking ayahuasca, going on like a spiritual journey, walking up a mountain, walking down, and then climbing into a cage with like a tiger or a mountain lion and just hanging out and like feeling their energy.
It doesn't surprise me at all.
Seems like a good
Doesn't
time.
surprise me at all. I'm surprised. I can't believe the guy didn't run for governor. That's the only surprise.
This close. I wonder what kept him.
He's got a great hair guy.
Great. Well, he got a great
Matthew
life, generally.
McConaughey went to
Running
a
for
great
governor
hair
ought to be
guy.
fun.
I don't know who that hair guy was, but a good hair guy.
Wait, like barber or something
Nope.
else?
Yeah,
Okay.
no. Harder.
Are you talking like Elon Musk PayPal
Yes.
era to Elon Musk?
You
now?
bet I am.
Okay, I get it.
I know this is sounding like the very end of the pod,
Mm-mm.
but before we actually hit the end of the
We got all
pod,
kinds of shit.
we have a clip that you all need to hear that maybe you all have heard at this point. You're listening to it sometime on Tuesday.
100% chance they've heard it.
But if not, here it is.
Hopefully you got
this
through
is
the
Joe
Ukraine.
Biden at the end of a press availability on Monday afternoon, and the question you hear shouted at him comes from one Peter Doocy of Fox News. Let's play the clip.
Do you think inflation is a political liability?
That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a bitch.
So Peter Doocy asked him, I don't know if you heard the beginning, Peter Doocy did ask him, Mr. President, is the inflation a political liability? And Joe Biden, standing up there, looking like he was giving prepared remarks into the microphone, said that.
Yeah, it keeps being described as a hot mic. I mean, normally that is like a lav that, you know, Billy Bush left on and walked to the
Yeah.
bathroom or something. Like he was speaking
Yeah,
directly.
like you're in a hot mic right now, Tommy.
Yeah, I'm hot micing right now because I'm speaking into the mic.
That is on.
This is
It's funny because I asked Jen if Doocy needed to adjust his strategy because he's always asking these gotcha questions and nobody takes the bait. And I guess all he needed was patience.
Yeah, and there's some people. There's a lot of reactions to this. Shockingly, this is one of those easy things where everyone will have a take, and it'll probably be on cable news for several days, and
Too
on
long.
Fox News 2 weeks because they love to be about themselves. Is there a better way to speak to the needs of Americans concerned about inflation? Sure.
Oh no.
Was this a serious question about inflation? No. Everyone wins here. Joe Biden vents. We all get to laugh. Peter Doocy gets
Yeah,
more
I'll tell you.
airtime.
I'll tell you,
Everybody
Peter
wins.
Doocy was pretty inflated after that.
Yes.
Well, here's the not to
Peter
not
Doocy
to-
went from 6 p.m. to to midnight.
Oh my
Oh
God.
wow.
Sorry.
Is that a get him the Greek reference? Look at you.
I think so.
To take the criticism seriously just for a second that this was somehow Biden belittling people's concerns about inflation. That's not what it was. That's not what his answer
know.
was. Like, if it was a hot mic moment where he was like, fucking inflation, who cares? You're right? Like, that's one thing. What he said was inflation, yeah, that's a real asset. Which is him basically saying, like, yeah, inflation's up. Like, that's a real political fucking benefit for me.
Exactly.
Of course it's not a benefit. It's bad. It's bad for everyone. Like, he's recognizing the problem of inflation.
No, the argument being made by actual normal Biden fan, Josh Barrow, is like, you don't want to give
I
Fox
see.
or conservatives any material to make it seem like you don't care about the thing or being flippant about the thing that they care about
Well,
the
look,
most.
I don't think it should be in Biden's prepared remarks next time.
Do you think it was?
I'm not gonna argue for that, but like, come on.
Like once in a while, I think a lot of our problems would have been solved earlier if somebody had been calling Peter Doocy a son of a bitch a little bit more frequently all along the way.
Peter Doocy, I've never met him. He might be a nice person. He looks like the legacy admissions bad guy in a college movie. You know,
And
he
you know,
just-
and you know because you see that in the mirror every fucking day. Oh yeah, Tommy, what is that like?
Tough hit. Tough hit.
Yeah.
No, it's funny.
You
I
guys
was
pledged the
watching
same frat.
Yeah, we
the
probably
two of you.
did.
because you were interviewing Jen today, and we were talking about Ukraine. I watched Jen's
Me
briefing
too, me
today,
too.
and
How
I
was it?
watched Peter, and I was like, God bless Jen. Because I do not know how she handles these questions every day without throwing the podium.
They're awesome.
From, like his questions. They're crazy.
They're awesome questions. This is what I said to Jen about them. It's like they're so transparently gotcha questions. They're like, so Joe Biden, he thinks crime doesn't matter, right? Yes or no?
So are you telling parents that they can never ever take a mask off their child? Ever?
Do you think school bureaucrats should have a boot on the neck of parents?
So when you walk in the briefing room, right, the press secretary goes up to the podium. There's a bunch of seats on the side for like the low level press schmucks like I was to sit. I sat through like a year and a half of those things. First of all, you get reporters reading physical copies of the paper in your face, right? No one's listening.
It's a real bar scene in Star Wars.
People are asking the question that was just asked, so they get a shot of themselves on camera asking the question. Like, it's not a serious, it's mostly an exercise in keeping your cool, which is actually why Jen is exceptionally good at it 99.99% of the time, because she is, answers with a light touch.
And in terms of just like the conservative media, Doocy's on like the good end of that.
Oh yeah,
they got Newsmax in there. They got OAN in there. Like I was looking at some of the
RT people,
the questions that Biden was getting at the end of that press conference when they started calling on all the right wing media people. I'm like, I'm trying to imagine all the crooked media hosts sitting in a Trump presser and everyone getting a question.
Yeah, I mean, if Trump is reelected, we're getting into that briefing.
We are
room,
getting
like January
into that.
6th.
I think we owe him some questions
We
after what they all did to Biden.
Yeah, the Newsmax guy is like, sir, can you draw a clock for me? Like, it was like that level of
I
insulting.
want to see Rhodes ask a question. I want to see Ira ask a question. Aaron. I want the whole crew. I want the whole crew asking questions.
Ira would get pretty spicy at
That's
that.
what I'm saying. I think it would be good. That's what we're looking. That's the only silver lining if there's ever a Republican administration again, which of course there won't be.
I just like the idea. It's like it's Aida sitting next to Jim Acosta and be like, "You better defend me for what I'm about to do." Why are you such a bitch? We're on the same team. Defend me. You're a little fucking bitch.
Aida sent she fires off like 3 tweets about pegging. Like, yeah, follow up on that.
All right, I think we've reached the end of the podcast now.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you to Jen Psaki for joining us today.
Jen.
After you braved Peter Doocy, you braved Jon Lovett. We
Yeah.
appreciate that.
You know who's glad he said no to this invite for today? Ron Klain.
Klain.
Ron was like a hard
Klain
no.
had a scheduling mix-up,
Yeah.
like Stacey Abrams in the Biden speech. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you later. We're going back on tour
We're hitting the road.
tomorrow. No, just kidding.
Yeah, the only wave you'll see is our hands. Because we're hitting the road.
Pod Save America is going back on tour this spring. The first shows start in April. Love It or Leave It is going on tour.
Yeah, exactly. Both.
Our listener presale is happening now through Thursday, before tickets go on sale to the general public.
Don't wait for that. All right.
Don't wait for those public.
Do
You're
the
listening.
pre-sale with the code Crooked, or you will you may run into some trouble.
The presale code is Crooked. For the full list of dates and for more information, visit crooked.com/events. Also, we tweeted this, but more cities to come.
More cities to come.
If your city's not
TK.
on there, more cities to come.
And we're trying
We still
to
got a whole fall to go.
want to hit as many cities that we had to cancel in 2020 as we can. So if you were in a 2020 city that got canceled, we know.
Remember debating that? Remember debating in March of 2020?
I still think we
Should
should
have
have
had it.
Should've gone to
Should've had
Seattle.
it. It's Tommy
Could have just honestly
Fauci over here.
probably would have just gotten
rid
the COVID early and just had those natural immunity. You know?
Oh no.
Oh God!
Aaron, here comes Aaron Rodgers.
Here comes to play the
Yeah.
I'm
the Steve
immunized.
Bannon theme song.
Did you watch the games over the weekend?
Ronan and I actually told this to White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, but Ronan and I tried to get an outdoor meal on Sunday, and we went to a neighborhood restaurant that is also apparently some sort of sports establishment. And they said, "Sorry, we're not seating outside because of the big game." And Ronan said, "What kind of game?"
Oh my God, that's awesome! Wow.
I did too. I didn't know
Like
what game
Settlers
it was.
of Catan.
I was like, "Wait, what are we
Scrabble.
looking at here? What
Um,
sport?"
Google Jimmy Garoppolo, and maybe you'll become a Niners fan.
What was that supposed to mean? Huh?
He's super hot.
Oh, you just say that.
That's why you Google image
Jimmy Garoppolo.
Jimmy G. There's a lot of Jimmy G Googling happening in my house over the
Oh.
weekend.
Oh, that's who that was.
Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome.